Rambo: First Blood Part 2, 1985, is arguably the most radical character transformation in modern cinematic history. The film's narrative function was not merely to continue the story of John Rambo, but to retroactively revise the national narrative concerning the Vietnam War. It effectively wrote over the psychological critique of the 1982 original, First Blood, with a potent, muscular, and simplified political thesis. The original Rambo was a victim of institutional neglect and PTSD. The Rambo of the sequel is an avenger of national pride. His trauma is minimized, and his isolation is leveraged for a mission of redemptive nationalism. This cultural shift reflects the ascendancy of the Reagan-era ideological confidence, a desire to project strength globally and exorcise the demons of past military failures. Reagan's endorsement. The film's politics were so explicit that President Ronald Reagan famously endorsed it. Upon the release of hostages in 1985, Reagan remarked, "Boy, after seeing Rambo last night, I know what to do the next time this happens." This direct political co-option cemented Rambo's status as a symbol of America's might is right and unilateral force, far exceeding his initial cinematic role. The new villain. The focus is shifted entirely away from the systemic betrayal by the police community, the villains of First Blood, to an external geopolitical threat, Soviet and Vietnamese communists. This binary opposition, American good versus communist evil, perfectly aligned the film with the prevailing Cold War tension, transforming the jungle into a simplified, high-stakes political chessboard. 1.2. The Cinematic Conflict. Stallone versus Cameron. The script for Rambo: First Blood Part 2 is a unique battlefield, having been extensively rewritten by star Sylvester Stallone over the original draft penned by rising talent James Cameron. The tension between these two writers' visions fundamentally shaped the final product. Cameron's intention, psychological action. Cameron's draft, written simultaneously with The Terminator and Aliens, reportedly sought a more grounded, character-driven action film. His plan to start Rambo in a neuropsychiatry wing of a veterans hospital would have retained the psychological foundation of First Blood. He also included a tech-savvy, often comedic sidekick, a common trope in his later work, to provide dialogue and technical exposition, thereby preventing Rambo from becoming a pure, silent killing machine. Stallone's implementation. Simplified politics. Stallone systematically removed most of Cameron's psychological and comedic elements. He opted to find Rambo in a prison labor camp, instantly painting him as a rugged man of action rather than a patient of mental illness. He vetoed the sidekick, preferring Rambo's laconic, mythic solitude. Crucially, Stallone inserted the heavy, explicit political dialogue, famously leading Cameron to state that he only wrote the action, Stallone wrote the politics. The result was a tighter, faster film that sacrificed human complexity for unambiguous ideological clarity. 2.0. The narrative design. The betrayal as justification. 2.1. The sham mission and the setup. The film's plot is meticulously designed to justify Rambo's eventual lawless rampage by first establishing his victimization by his own side. Marshall Murdoch, the bureaucratic evil, the character of Marshall Murdoch is essential. He embodies the contemptible, risk-averse Washington bureaucrat who is willing to sacrifice American servicemen for political expediency and to avoid spending resources. Murdoch's mission is revealed to be a sham, a reconnaissance trip designed to fail, allowing the government to publicly close the book on the emotionally resonant POW MIA issue. The strict order. Rambo is explicitly ordered, do not engage the enemy, do not rescue any prisoners. This order is the final insult. It positions the U.S. government as the primary villain preventing the rescue of its own soldiers. Rambo's subsequent defiance of this order is framed not as insubordination, but a supreme act of patriotism and moral courage. 2.2. The symbolic loss of technology. Rambo's insertion into Vietnam is marked by the immediate loss of his high-tech gear, satellite radio, infrared camera, etc., due to a parachute malfunction. This is a crucial cinematic step. Primal return. The loss of modern technology forces Rambo to rely solely on his primal skills, his knife, his strength, and his compound bow. This elevates the conflict from a military operation to a mythic confrontation between the pure warrior and the forces of bureaucracy and evil. The bow and arrow. The compound bow with explosive-tipped arrows becomes Rambo's signature weapon, a blend of primitive and futuristic firepower that perfectly symbolizes the character's unique status as a warrior who transcends technology. 3.0. Production details and the action philosophy. 3.1. Director George P. Cosmatos, the auteur of action. Director George P. Cosmatos was brought in to helm the sequel, bringing his own style of large-scale operatic action, contrasting sharply with Ted Kocheff's subtle direction in First Blood. Cinematography. Working with the legendary cinematographer Jack Cardiff, Cosmatos created a slick, high-gloss visual aesthetic. The jungle of Acapulco, Mexico, doubling for Vietnam, is rendered with explosive colors and dramatic lighting, perfectly suited for the mythic scope of the revenge fantasy. The scale of the spectacle. Cosmatos prioritized spectacle, ensuring the film lived up to its massive budget. The helicopter duels, the massive explosions, and the continuous rolling gun battles required a level of logistical mastery that set a new bar for the action genre. This concludes the Deep Dive Part 1, establishing the film's radical political and cinematic re-engineering, the internal struggle between its screenwriters, and the technical philosophy that created the era's definitive action icon.
The tragic romance between Rambo and the Vietnamese resistance fighter Co Phuong Bao, Julia Nixon, is the most crucial narrative device in the sequel, serving as the essential bridge between the man of trauma in First Blood and the weapon of vengeance in Part 2. Co Bao as an agent of redemption. Co is the only person Rambo truly connects with in Vietnam, recognizing his purity of motive despite his overwhelming skill for violence. Her character introduces a brief possibility of a life outside the war for Rambo. In the quiet moments they share, Rambo experiences a momentary respite from his eternal struggle, a glimpse of the peace he longed for in his final monologue in the first film. Co's expressed desire to leave Vietnam with him, maybe in Thailand we find peace, underscores the stakes of the mission beyond just rescuing the POWs. The necessary sacrifice. Co's ambush and brutal death, occurring moments after Rambo's emotional bond with her is affirmed, is necessary to complete his transformation. Her death is the ultimate violation. It is the final personal wound that justifies Rambo's ensuing indiscriminate killing spree. The event confirms for Rambo that peace is impossible and that the only remaining path is unmitigated war. This sacrifice releases Rambo from the ethical constraints of civilian life and sanctions his subsequent acts of extreme violence. 5.2. The psychological function of the torture sequence. The capture and torture of Rambo by the Soviet Vietnamese forces, led by Lieutenant Colonel Podovsky and Captain Ving, are vital to the film's structure, even if critics found them excessive. Re-traumatization as fuel. Rambo, a former POW who suffered unimaginable torture, is forced to relive his worst nightmares. This sequence, featuring electric shock,
beatings, and the threat of immolation serves as the ultimate justification for his actions. The subsequent rampage is not just revenge for the POWs, but a furious, personal catharsis against his own past suffering and the cruelty of his captors. Podolsky as the perfect foe. Podolsky, or Stephen Burkoff, is a pure distillation of Cold War evil, a sadistic Soviet officer who openly mocks American ideals. His character provides the perfect, unambiguous villain, ensuring the audience's full emotional alignment with Rambo's mission to destroy him. 6.0. The climax and thematic resolution. 6.1. Rambo versus the world. The final act is a systematic, violent reversal of fortune, where Rambo utilizes his terrain knowledge and ingenuity to become the hunter. The M60 and the myth. Rambo equips himself with the massive M60 machine gun, the compound bow, and a near-infinite supply of ammunition. The visual iconography, bare chest, oiled physique, red headband is completed here. The scene where Rambo destroys the Vietnamese patrol using the explosive arrows is where the character officially transitions from a former Green Beret to an unrealistic, mythic superhero. The final helicopter duel. The climactic battle between Rambo's captured Soviet helicopter and Podolsky's heavily armed gunship is the film's centerpiece action sequence. It is the ultimate confrontation of American might, symbolically represented by the American soldier piloting the captured Soviet hardware, against the Soviet threat. Rambo's victory is clean, decisive, and spectacular, fulfilling the audience's desire for a complete, unambiguous triumph. 6.2. The political conclusion, breaking the silence. The film ends not with a victory celebration, but with a highly charged confrontation back at the U.S. base in Thailand, addressing the original betrayal. Confronting Murdoch. Rambo's final act is to hold Marshal Murdoch at knife point, but he chooses not to kill him. Instead, he destroys the electronic equipment, shouting his core political grievance. "You know there's more men out there, don't you? Answer me." By destroying the communications gear, Rambo symbolically destroys the bureaucratic silence and political maneuvering that allowed the POWs to be abandoned. The demand for love. Rambo's final speech to Colonel Troutman encapsulates the film's powerful yet simplistic appeal to American nationalism. "I want what every other guy who came over here and spilled his guts and gave everything he had wants, for our country to love us as much as we love it." This line transformed Rambo into a cinematic figure of national martyrdom, using hyperviolence to demand emotional recognition from the nation that scorned its veterans. 7.0. Legacy and the cultural footprint. 7.1. The Juggernaut's commercial and paradoxical critical success. Rambo First Blood Part 2 was an unparalleled commercial success, generating over $300 million worldwide, but its critical reception was one of outright dismissal. The Razzie Paradox. The film winning the Golden Raspberry Award for Worst Picture, while simultaneously receiving an Academy Award nomination for Best Sound Effects Editing, perfectly illustrated its paradox. It was critically rejected for its politics and screenplay, but technically lauded for its spectacular execution of action and sound design. This duality cemented its status as an influential, yet intellectually maligned piece of pop culture. A global icon. The film cemented the Rambo brand globally. The image of the character became synonymous with American military power, resilience, and unilateral action, inspiring countless imitations and serving as a political talking point throughout the decade. 7.2. The enduring influence on action cinema. Rambo First Blood Part 2 created the template for the modern, over-the-top, high-concept action movie. The one-man army standard. It established the rules for the 80s and 90s action hero, muscular, mostly silent, politically righteous, and capable of eliminating an army single-handedly. This formula was immediately adopted by Arnold Schwarzenegger in Commando and many others. The political action film. It proved that action films could be explicitly political vehicles for ideological statements, paving the way for similar revenge or redemption narratives that sought to fix historical wrongs through cinematic violence. Rambo: First Blood Part 2 remains a cultural touchstone, a film that perfectly captured the aggressive, simplified political mood of its time by sacrificing psychological depth for spectacular, mythic, and deeply satisfying revenge.